and welcome or welcome back to another episode of The Pilot Principle. The podcast where we take a look at just the first episode of a series, the pilot, and then use it to decide if we should watch the entire series. Now, if that sounds up your diagon alley, then make sure to follow on whatever platform you're currently listening on, because I review a new show every single week, but I do ask you not to hold me to that promise. So on this episode of The Pilot Principle, we are chatting episode 1 of Prime Video's new action drama series, On Call. An adrenalized procedural that puts us inside the squad car and on the streets with Long Beach police through training officer Traci Harmon and rookie Alex Diaz. To be honest, I can't quite remember what made me want to press play on this series in the first place. I feel like it was probably seeing Trowan Belisario, and if you don't know who that is, I'm going to get to that in like 1 minute. But otherwise, I don't know, it was there, a really big advertising banner on Prime Video, thought it was half an hour, thought why not? So let's get into finding out whether or not the pilot episode was worth it. Unfortunately, there is no pilot title, but the pilot synopsis tells us that in the wake of tragedy, LBPD training officer Traci Harmon takes on new trainee Alex Diaz, who on day 1 is already learning the job is harder than he imagined. As I said, we have a nice short episode of 30 minutes and a series length of 8 episodes. And of course, all episodes are available to watch now on Prime Video. The pilot episode was written by Tim Walsh and Elliot Wolf. Now, Elliot Wolf is the son of Dick Wolf. Now, if that name sounds familiar, then you have probably watched one of his many criminal procedural shows. So I'm talking the whole Law and Order universe, the Chicagos, as in Justice, Fire, Med, and PD, as well as the FBIs, which are FBI. Do you know what? I really miss Zico Zaki from FBI. Pour one out to that tall man. And then there are other 2 FBI spin-offs that he is not in. So I think there's like FBI Most Wanted and FBI International. In terms of Wolf's, Junior Wolf's, Cubs writing credits, he doesn't have any. This is his first thing, but it's okay. It's okay because he is co-writing this episode with Tim Walsh, and Walsh has written episodes of Chicago PD and Hightown, so that's good, you know, that he's not doing it alone. So moving on to who directed the pilot episode, we have Eric LaSalle, and Eric LaSalle has directed episodes of Chicago Justice, Med, and PD, as well as some Law and Order, and really randomly, Once Upon a Time. Everybody has a random episode of Once Upon a Time on their filmography, and that's no shade. I thoroughly enjoyed and watched all of Once Upon a Time. Now, moving on to cast, I mentioned her name earlier, and that is Trowan Belisario, and she plays Traci Harmon. And most people know Belisario from starring as a liar in Pretty Little Liars, and she was also in the miniseries Plan B. Next, we have Brandon Laracuente, and he plays Alex Diaz. And Laracuente has starred in Bloodline, The Good Doctor, and the Party of 5 reboot, which I will never watch because the original is fantastic. And finally, the pilot also stars Lori Loughlin. And personally, I'm just glad to see that she's getting work after her time in prison. I personally loved the whole Garage Cell murder mystery series and was devastated that my cheesy little mystery series came to an end because of her prison sentence. Okay, so moving on, we are going to talk about the first 10 minutes of the unnamed pilot episode of On Call. And if you don't know, then the reason we talk about the first 10 minutes of a pilot episode is because that is the part of the pilot that's supposed to really entice us to keep watching. It's supposed to hook us into hopefully watching the entire pilot episode, which of course is the gateway to the entire series. So the first 10 minutes of the pilot episode of On Call goes like this. We meet an Officer Delgado, and Officer Delgado pulls over a car that looks suspicious. She is right in her suspicions. However, it's fatal because the person in the backseat of the car ends up shooting her dead, and this shooting is filmed by people nearby. And then we move over to the police department and we meet Alex as he arrives on his first day for work, well, for field training. And as he's entering the building and interacting with people and he comes across a memorial for Officer Delgado, somebody tells him that field training 101 is wait for backup. Then we meet Traci, and Traci is getting ready for the day, and somebody comes up to her and tells her sorry for your loss, likely in regards to Officer Delgado. Finally, Alex and Traci are paired together, and Traci tells Alex that she has a low tolerance for people who bitch, but if you put in the effort, then she can teach you the rest. So that's something. Now, during a staff briefing, we learn who was involved in Officer Delgado's death. It was the East Barrio Clique, street name Maniac, and the person who shot her was one Eddie Watson. Not really a threatening name, that, is it? Either way, during the briefing, the officers are all told not to engage if they come across Eddie Watson, the shooter. And then finally, Alex and Traci head out, and Traci drums into Alex the importance of always knowing where you are because it can be life or death. And then the pair head out on their first call, and that is about the 10-minute mark. And for an opening, it was all right. You know, the whole Officer Delgado being, murdered is an interesting hook. It happens in the first 2 minutes, and you're like, crap. Did not see that coming. And leading on from that, we do in the first 10 minutes sort of get an idea of how the series is going to be filmed because there's a mixture of media. So we sometimes see body cam footage, CCTV footage. As I mentioned, somebody was filming when she got shot. So we sometimes see it through people's phones and it's a bit documentary style. And I don't know, I've said a lot of things. And so even now as I'm talking about it, I'm unsure if it just feels a little bit all over the place to use this whole mixed media way of capturing the LBPD. That is not fun to say. Long Beach Police Department. And the final thing to mention from the first 10 minutes is that I'm not quite sure how I feel about Traci. She's a bit weird. As in the way she and Alex first meet, she's like, good, you're doing a good job. Like, no bitching and I could teach you the rest. All right, why? What's with the attitude? I just met you. I don't know. I can't quite get her vibe. Everybody's kind of avoiding her, but at the same time, they're checking in on her about what happened to Officer Delgado. And I feel like I just don't quite get where her mind is at. Also, I don't have a frame of reference of how long has passed between Delgado's shooting and Alex's first day at training. Moving on to character, and we might as well just continue on bitching and moaning about Officer Traci Harmon. I think she's an officer. I don't think she's a detective. She's in a uniform and she's on the beat, she's patrolling them streets. So I'm just going to assume she's an officer. Now, as I sort of touched on, I don't really understand what kind of character she's supposed to be. So over the course of the pilot episode, we watch as she threatens a guy who has beat up his mum and she's like, you're the worst, I could kill you. And she's all kind of violent and mean. But then after she turns around and sees that Alex saw that interaction and happened to capture it all on his body cam, she basically tells him to report her because what she did wasn't right and, be a good officer. But then also she's sort of trolling the streets, kind of keeping an eye out for the East Barrio crew, despite being told to stay away from them. But then she doesn't reward Alex for going rogue when he goes a bit rogue at the end. And then she tells Alex that people on the team are out to get her, so he should do the right thing. I don't know. It's just a bit, she's all over the place. And I think because of that, I can't quite get a sense of who she is as a character. It's clear, though, that she does want to avenge Officer Delgado. We do find out in the pilot episode that Harmon trained Delgado at some point, but beside that, I don't understand why she's sort of hell-bent or quietly hell-bent, earth-bent on revenge for what happened to Delgado. So yes, over the course of the episode, we see many sides to Harmon. And I think she's supposed to be this sort of hard as nails and unemotional and by the book character. But all of it just feels a little bit too tropey. And I think perhaps over the course of the series that all of those sides to her will be stripped away and sort of disappear in order to protect Alex, her new charge, probably because she was unable to protect Delgado. The second character to talk about is Alex Diaz, and he is very much the whole goody two shoes, ready to fight the good fight. And he has definitely got something to prove, but we don't know who he is trying to prove it to or why. He clearly wants to do good as an officer, and we know that his mum hates cops, and it's almost as if Diaz is trying to prove that cops can do a good job and still be a good symbol of hope in the community, because we see him trying to help out a drug addict by convincing them to turn their life around. Very noble. So yeah, he's trying to be a good officer. But honestly, I feel like he needs to just like chill out a bit. He's really trying to play the hero, and this is not a game. Now, over the course of the episode, we do see that Diaz is possibly willing to lie to protect Harmon, who he literally just met. And this is because when Harmon tells him to report her for talking smack to this domestic violence enactor, Diaz is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand by your side. I got you. And it's like, all right, bro, let's not like start perjuring ourselves on day one. But sure, I thought we were goody, but all right then. So yeah, he's really just trying to be a police officer, you know? And I do think possibly over the course of the series, his hero/morality complex will be tested. Also, I kind of feel like his complex will probably rub some people up the wrong way, probably starting with his, what is she, his supervisor? I guess she's his training officer, Harmon. Yeah, the dynamic between the two of them thus far is very much do as I say. Okay, except for when I want to run off and play hero. But hey, I suppose they've just kind of met. Now, in terms of the antagonist, I guess there kind of is one. I suppose that would be Eddie Watson, who is the man who shot Officer Delgado. But also maybe the city itself, Long Beach, California, could also be an antagonist because it's rife with criminals. Hard to say. They don't really set anybody up too heavily to be an antagonist in the pilot episode. And to be honest, I also can't really imagine how catching this guy, Watson, will take the entire series unless it becomes part of a larger criminal scheme. On the other hand, this is supposed to be a procedural drama, so perhaps Eddie Watson won't appear again until the season finale. And now it is time for a very quick interlude to see what my media consumption has been looking like beyond the pilot principle. And of course, we always start with books. And first to note, clap for me, I finished my first book of 2025, and that is The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman, and that is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series. And I think if you've read book 1 and 2 and enjoy it, continue. Nothing's stopping you. Don't let anything stand in your way by continuing to see what's happening with these old people living in Kent. Having finished that book, I have started reading 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I'm not very far. I think I've only read 50 pages. Holly Jackson wrote A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is one of my favorite series of recent years, actually, which is a big surprise because it's a YA book. As I say, can't say too much about 5 Survive, but that's what I'm currently reading. In regards to film, I'm actually very behind when it comes to film. I'm trying to be very intentional this year with my watching because my average reviews are all around 2.5, and I really want to get that up to at least 3.5. So I'm just being very specific with what I watch. Thus far, I've only watched 2 films this year. The first was Memoir of a Snail, and the second was Longlegs. Memoir of a Snail, I highly rated. Longlegs wasn't for me. I gave that a 2.5, and I was very irritated to be back in that 2.5 category. And finally, moving over to TV land, I finally, guess what? Okay, I'll give you a second to guess. Guess what I finally watched? You are possibly correct because I cannot hear you, but I finally watched Baby Reindeer. I know, it only took me a full year and it winning a whole bunch of awards at the Emmys and the recent Golden Globes for me to finally press play on that. But I did it. You know, I'm one of you now. mainstream media. It's I mean, it was all right. It was very easy to watch. Yeah, I think it was a really good show. I can see why it's so lauded. On the flippity flip side, I actually hated is a strong word, but I'm just going to use it for your emphasis. But I hated the main character. So he made it quite difficult to watch. In other news, I have recently started watching Parenthood, and I still have not finished. I know, I'm sorry. I will finish it by the end of this month. I promise. I still haven't finished watching The Day of the Jackal. It's just so intense, people. I just haven't been able to gear myself up to that level of anxiousness. But I will. Right, make sure to let me know what you are watching or reading over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principal. And let's get back to talking about On Call. Okie dokie. Before we get into talking about the end of episode Hook, we are going to quickly outline the main plot points of the pilot episode. In terms of the main story arc, so I believe this is to do with the relationship and character and trust building between Traci and Alex. We watch over the course of the pilot as they get called out to a domestic disturbance. They stop someone driving under a suspended license, which turns into a bit of a drug compassion control storyline. They're working each other out, seeing what each other's limits are. So I suppose that's the main story arc for the pilot episode. But again, it's a bit weird because it's technically a procedural, self-proclaimed. So these points are both fixated on the pilot episode alone, but also could expand into the series. Now, in terms of the secondary story arc, we've got the whole East Barrio clique. So they need to catch who killed Delgado, but we also need to find out why they killed it, because she stopped them because of their license or something. I can't remember, but she stopped them, and then she was like, hey, step out of the vehicle. And then it was like, bam, 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 dead. So why did they go to those lengths? Why did they not just step out of the vehicle when they were asked to? So that is the secondary storyline. And the C plot, the third storyline, I think that will probably be more the personal side, which they don't really get into too much, but it's basically whatever personal bullshit is going on. So Traci mentioned that people on the force are out to get her. She sounds a bit paranoid, to be honest, but I'm not saying she's paranoid. I'm just saying she sounds paranoid because we literally don't see anybody give her so much as a bad look. So yeah. Anyway, as well as that, we know that she trained Delgado and she has somehow been affected by her death, even though we don't really see that effect in the pilot episode. But, I suppose those are the three main character-driven and plot-driven points that take us through the pilot episode and will likely continue throughout the series. Now that you have that context, in terms of the end of episode Hook, Traci and Alex basically get into a car chase with those responsible for Delgado's murder. The car chase turns into a foot chase between Alex and the shooter, whose name I've already forgotten. But anyway, he keeps chasing, Alex keeps chasing, and he's ignoring his radio where Traci's asking for his location and telling him to stand down, stand down, stand down. But he refuses and he just keeps running. I don't know how people can run like this, because me, I actually can't run. Every time I see people running on TV, I'm like, wow, good for you. I could never, but good for you. Also, at the end of episode, Alex does not, in fact, capture the forgotten named Barrio bastard, and Traci basically has a go at him for not listening. And in terms of looking at the end of the episode from where we started in the episode, it's a little bit dissatisfying, to be honest with you, because nothing has been resolved. Delgado gets shot at the beginning and then they fail to catch the person who shot her at the end. Okay, what did I just watch 30 minutes of television for is the question. However, this does tell me that over the course of the series, we can possibly expect a continued search for the Barrio bastard, and perhaps Alex starts to learn to listen to commands from Traci, and perhaps Traci opens up a bit about her relationship with Officer Delgado, and I don't know, together Traci and Alex will reach a level of camaraderie, trust, and hijinks. But that's just my guess. In terms of what I think the pilot did really well, I suppose we quickly get a sense of the kind of place that the Long Beach we're being exposed to in the series is. We very quickly meet domestic abusers and drug addicts and, gang members. So we're like, oh, so this is Long Beach, California. Cool, 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 cool. So I do think that is effectively done in the space of half an hour, I may add. So with that being said, I would also say that if you like when shows expose the gritty underbelly of tourist trapped areas, and if you prefer a procedural drama to the ones with a big dramatic serial arc and it's all cat and mouse, then On Call as a whole might be for you. Now, on the flippity flip side, in terms of things that let the pilot episode down, like I know I said in its positives that it gives a specific light of Long Beach in a good way, it also gives you zero sense of space for Long Beach. Like when I think Long Beach, California, I'm thinking, Beverly Hills. Wait, it's Beverly Hills in California. Yes, that's where I wanna be. Like I'm thinking roller skates, living in Beverly Hills. Like geographically, I can't tell you that Beverly Hills and Long Beach are in a similar vicinity to one another. But my point is, as somebody across the pond who's only seen California on television, I feel like the show needed to lean in ever so slightly in the pilot episode to my idea of Long Beach, which is the beach. I don't think I saw the beach in the pilot episode. Your Long Beach Police Department. I feel like you need to sell me the lie before you take it from me, Even if you want to get away from the cliche, you still need to get us to buy into this different worldview by giving us the worldview we know. Yeah, that one's a little bit more eloquently said, isn't it? Now, secondly, and probably the main thing that let the pilot episode down is Traci's characteristics. She's a bit all over the gaff, which makes it hard to see how she will grow over the series and how I could possibly grow to love her. Now, with that in mind, I would say that if you don't like a good cop, bad cop, rookie cop, veteran cop dynamic, you should probably stay clear of On Call. And if you prefer a clear serial arc to your shows, no episodic shenanigans, you want to know exactly where you are, you want to be rooted in a place that is familiar to you. Like you want London to be London, you want Long Beach to be Long Beach, you want the cliche, then stay away from On Call. This is something new. Alrighty, I guess the last thing for me to do is to give the pilot episode a pilot score, and I will be giving it 2 out of 5. It was quite slow for something self-proclaimed as adrenaline-filled. Also, Traci's character overshot mysterious and landed at tidily aloof. And honestly, the whole who killed Delgado storyline, I mean, it seems interesting enough, but honestly it doesn't take much to make a violent murderous gangster interesting, so the bar was never that high to begin with. And the pilot episode also didn't really make me care that Delgado had died, considering it's this big thing that happens at the start and everybody's upset about, and I'm like, okay, cool, moving on. Suffice to say, I shall not be continuing with On Call. Thanks for joining me this week. Let me know if you will be continuing with On Call. Seriously, let me know, because if you tell me it's good, I might have to eat my words and at least watch the second episode. You can let me know your thoughts over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principle, and I will catch you on the next episode.